let's get started here. So really super excited here to have Jay Nichols to give us some Blue Mind. I think we all need that right now. We were just talking about the latest kind of monstrosities going on outside of these walls, and it's good to put that aside for a moment and think about something more uplifting. And just as a reminder to the students who are in here, so I'm going to hand around this sheet here. If you're not a student, you don't need to sign that. And that Jay we're kind of co-sponsoring, but it's really Jay's deal here, this Blue Mind experience, which I'm sure he'll mention at some point in January, a J term, and there's still a few slots available for Miss students who want to go to that. So if you're interested in that, especially after you'd be particularly motivated after today's talk, come talk to me and we'll figure out getting you a slot for that course, which I'm really looking forward to. But I'm just gonna turn over the mic here because I can't do justice to what he's gonna talk about. So let's give him a warm welcome.
So I want to make sure that everybody has a blue marble. I guess the best way to ask the question is if you don't have one, raise your hand. Or, okay, so we need.
I'm gonna pass.
Yeah, that'd be cool. What's that? Another one. There's the jars. I'm over here. There are plenty of blue marbles if you need extras. Once we for your friend. Yes. Once you understand why you have a marble in your hand, you may want to pick up an extra 2 or 3 of them. So normally I wouldn't start with this, but these are made out of recycled glass, not plastic. They're made by Marble King, the last remaining marble manufacturer in the U.S., based in West Virginia on the Ohio River. They're hanging on by a thread, literally, for reasons that I won't go into right now. But most marbles are not made in the U.S. anymore. Most kids don't play with marbles, but the marbles that are made are usually made in China or Mexico. So the marble manufacturing crisis is probably not on your mind too much, but it is on mine because I know Barry Fox, who runs Marble King. If you're extra interested in the marble story in Barry Fox, you can look up Marble King, Barry, B-E-R-I, Fox, on Stephen Colbert's show. She was interviewed about this issue, not about marbles per se, but about broader manufacturing issues in the U.S. So you thought it was just a marble. It's a lesson in economics and even more. So if you want to get in touch, if you wake up tomorrow and you say, damn, I didn't write down the lady who was the CEO of Marble King, but you did write down my email address, social media, and then we use the hashtag Blue Mind to kind of track this conversation. It's pretty interesting. If you type in Blue Mind in Instagram and just look at all of the different people from all over the world in all the different sectors that have gotten involved in this conversation, hinting at the possibility that we may be, I don't throw around the word movement lightly, but we may be creating some kind of movement around this idea that water has more value than just as a resource and for biodiversity, which are incredibly important values. But there's more to it than that. So that's really the subject of our chat, and it kind of comes all back to water and this broader conversation about the way we interact with water. That, I don't know about you, many of you are students and you're in the midst of your education. I went to the 24th grade, which freaks the hell out of my 2 kids. Like, Dad, are you crazy? Why would you go to the 24th grade? They're in 10th and 7th right now, so it kind of scares me. But I never learned in school, in economics classes, in grad school for economics, in my PhD for wildlife ecology and evolutionary biology, I never learned that nature had any emotional value. We weren't taught that. I never learned in health class that you could sit in the water if you were having a crappy day, and it might make your day a little bit better. You could go for a swim or a surf or a walk. We just didn't learn that. And I don't think it's taught well, if at all, in most schools today. If you learned that, you had a great teacher, and they should win awards for being really ahead of the curve. But for some reason, we leave out what I would say makes life worth living in many cases out of our educational system. And the argument is that it's not measurable, it's not quantifiable, you can't put a dollar value on it, which is not true. You can. It is measurable. You need to talk to neuroscientists, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It is quantifiable, and you can try to put a dollar value on it and occasionally have some successes doing that, if that's your thing. So we have an ongoing survey that I can send to you to fill out, but we just ask people, what are the kinds of water-based activities that you've participated in? And the top three, at least on this list, we're going to the aquarium, swimming, all kinds of swimming, and looking at wildlife, aquatic wildlife, whether it's whales, dolphins, turtles, intertidal organisms, and so on. Seals, I don't want to leave any out. Birds, I don't want to leave out any favorites. Jellyfish, or jellies, I guess is the better term. Another question on that survey, and I just sort of front-loaded it with these two responses. I just asked, compared to other ways that you relax, find happiness, romance, play, creativity, how does being near, in, on, or underwater compare to those other ways that you achieve those things? And somewhere around 95% of the respondents, about 800 respondents, said that it's the same, more, or much more. Okay, that's interesting. That seems kind of significant. It's not a lot less, it's not exactly the same. It's the same, more, or a lot more. In many cases, more and a lot more. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If water is a source of happiness, romance, relaxation, play, and creativity, we should be thinking about it and talking about it that way. The great poet, Bruce Springsteen, said, "'Cause down the shore, everything's all right." And you probably know exactly what he meant. He meant down the shore, everything's all right. If things are not going all right, go to the shore. Like take your baby on a Saturday night. I don't know if you remember the rest of the song, Jersey Girl, but I'm not going to sing it for you. Carlos Argentino, famous Latin American singer. En el mar la vida es más sabrosa, en el mar te quiero mucho más. In the sea, life is sweeter, life is tastier. In the sea, I love you more. Right? Not going to sing that one either. So this blue marble is basically, if you tune out from here on and forget everything else we talk about, you've got it. You've got the basic idea. This marble is to remind you tomorrow, you'll find it in your pocket or your bag, that this was an interesting conversation. And it's a reminder that we live on a little blue planet. Again, another poet, David Bowie. That everything we do depends on, everything we do matters. Every little thing, big thing, good thing, bad thing, it all matters. And we actually do nothing alone. Even getting here today, putting your clothes on and getting here today, probably involved about 1,000 people to make your clothes, to get you here, to create this space. Or if not thousands of people. The electricity that we're using right now, the technology, even these marbles, a handful of people to make these marbles. So that's what the blue marble is a reminder of that, but there's more to it that I'll get to. And I like to ask people, what's your water? And I've taken 2 talks that I've given in the past and I've mashed them together. And I'm going to go through some of this really fast, but I want to give you a taste of the conversation we're having across 9 big sectors of society. And we're delivering this message, not just to conservation biologists, but to people in healthcare and real estate, people in education, people in the design world. But I always start my talks with this simple question, and it's a really good airplane question. If you're on an airplane, turn to the person next to you and say, "What's your water?" And they're like, "What are you talking about? This in this cup here." "No, but what's the water you dream about? What's the water that you think about when you're falling asleep and you dream about going to, and you get a little bit of time, that's where you want to go. And when did you fall in love with your water?" Think about that moment. When you were just like, "Wow, this feels so good. I love this water, this lake, this river, this pool, this ocean, this bay. I love the way it makes me feel so good, like the best version of myself." My guess is that is a pretty powerful, important, deep emotional memory that connects you to other people. Chances are you didn't go there alone. Chances are you had a guide. And it might have been a teacher, it might have been a parent, it might have been a sibling, a friend, who said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to surf. I'm going to show you the tide pools. I'm going to teach you how to jump off the diving board. I'm going to teach you how to swim. We all have some kind of story that connects us to water, whatever that water is. Right? And I think that needs to be discussed, and that is what makes us unstoppable. That love, that emotional connection. You do not have an answer to fear. I'm going to guess nobody said, oh, my water, yeah, it's this app that shows me water photos, or this app that plays water sounds. That's my water that I fell in love with. But chances are it wasn't a film. Chances are it was an actual body of water, real water. For some people, that relationship is very simple, and it relates to hydration and hygiene on a daily basis. And they go to the water, they scoop it up, they bring it back home, they deliver it to their family. And for some people, it's a body of water, they learn to swim. And this is a group of young immigrants who learn to swim in a public pool. For some people, it's a connection to wildlife. It's connection to the other organisms that depend on the water. And if you're ever up in the bow of a boat and the dolphins come, everybody's in the bow. Hopefully not the captain, everybody else. And there's joy, there's happiness, there's a desire for that to never end until the dolphins decide it's over and they take off. For some people, it's fishing, and if you've ever gone fly fishing, you know sometimes it doesn't involve fish. It involves standing in the water quietly with your thoughts, meditating essentially. And a lot of fishers will tell you, yeah, that's how it feels and that's what it is. Sometimes it's extreme sports, like more white water. There's a little more adrenaline to it, whether it's a river or surfing big waves. Sometimes it's going out with the people you care about the most and paddling and just spending time getting away, disconnecting from all the tethers that connect us electronically, screens, and just going out and chilling together, making really good memories. A lot of times it's just being in the water together, hand in hand, a kid on your shoulders, jumping around, splashing around, having a conversation, maybe you even bring something to eat with you. Those are places we build memories. Sometimes it's a bridge that passes over the water. That's your glimpse of the water for the day. And a well-designed bridge affords a nice view. A poorly designed bridge gets you from A to B. I'll say poorly might not be the right word. Safely gets you from A to B. That's a good, safe bridge, but not a good design because it may block the view. Right? A well-designed bridge also gives you that emotional moment. And for some people, that's really a highlight of their day. And you know what I'm talking about if you've been driving around the Bay Area and you get out there and you're just like, resist the urge to take a photo while you're driving off the bridge. I know you've done it. I know you've done those photos out the window. The edge of the water is a place we go to dream, right? To have big ideas, to think about who we are, whether we even realize the significance of those moments at that moment or not. Sometimes it's these kinds of experiences. This is the Newport Aquarium in Kentucky, and it could be the Monterey Bay Aquarium anywhere around the world. But these nights in the aquarium experiences, literally dreams are made out of this stuff. My kids spent nights in the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They're still talking about it, and they're teenagers. Sometimes we take our non-human friends, right, and go to the water, and they dig it too. This is not a purely human conversation. That's a whole other lecture. I've got this whole collection of YouTube videos of animals enjoying water, from chimps, filmed by Jane Goodall, to dogs, to a more recent one of a gorilla doing basically what could best be described as flash dance in a kiddie pool. I don't know if you've seen that one, but animals having an emotional experience in water. Scientists used to shy away from it, that sort of language. Turns out, the neuroscientists who study animals are saying, oh yeah, their neurochemistry is in some ways similar to ours. Our coast here, from California up to Oregon, up to Washington, is just full of coastal wilderness and places to go experience solitude. Waves to learn to surf or to teach others to surf. This is a photo from Operation Surf, a group of veterans learning to surf in Santa Cruz there. I love following turtles. I've lost many hours of my life just following them, losing track of time, missing calls and meetings and things. Actually, I almost missed my friend's wedding because we were just following a turtle. I'll tell you that, so the other part of that story, I did get to the wedding in time and I had this mask mark around my face. And I was like the coolest cucumber in the room because my body temperature was lower than everybody else's. And it was in the Bahamas, it was really hot. Everybody else was sweating and I was just chill. And I looked like a goofball because I had a mask ring pressed in my face, but I was pretty blissed out. Brian Scary's photo there, because some of the photo cuts are cropped up, but that's a Brian Scary photo. Just full immersion. Right? Sometimes the water is frozen in the ice storm. Sometimes it reflects the world around it. Sometimes this is something as simple as a tap water sip out of a bubbler. And this is the way we used to get water when we were kids. I don't know how we survived. I never really remember being thirsty, but somehow we survived. Sometimes our water is the domestic kind. A tub, a shower, a spa. I really can't list how many people I've met since I wrote this book, Blue Mind, who have come up and said, I get my best ideas in the bath, the shower, the tub, while swimming, over and over and over again. Right? So whether that is simply that they're not looking at a screen, they're not talking to people, or something more, it's still true. It's still notable. And some pretty notable folks in our history of big ideas have made those claims. So this is not just an ocean conversation, it is a blue economy conversation. It is a blue mind conversation, a water conversation. It isn't just about the coasts and oceans, but it has to do with our lakes and rivers. So for me, my water goes back to my dad. He, basically I think of that question, what's your water? Immediately I think of Dad. He passed away last year on Earth Day. Just left us that, I guess, message, gift to remember forever. And he passed away on the corner of, on Drinkwater Avenue. But that was another odd thing. On the first night of Passover under a full moon. So do whatever you want with that. But he taught me to swim, taught me to dive, and I rode on his back until I had the confidence to do it myself. And I do that with my kids. They ride on my back. We call it the turtle ride. And I imagine they will do that with their kids. And you may have done that with someone in your life and passed that on. Early memory, that was my Uncle Larry snapped that photo, one of my favorite moments of my life. At 11 years old, felt like the best version of myself up to that point in my life, right then and there. It's a deep lake in Wyoming, and just the taste of the trout and the feel of the water and the smell of the air and the sound of the wolves at night and all of that together just made me feel so alive, and probably is the reason we're in this room together. At least I'm in this room right now. It has something to do with that trip with my uncles. Another trip with my daughter to Indonesia doing sea turtle research, she would say the same thing about this photo. This is the okay, everything's okay, diver sign. That okay right there means every damn thing in the whole universe is okay right now in our life, because it was just a great day, a great dive. A lot of fun with colleagues doing great research, and Grace, my daughter Grace, remembers it very clearly. I was actually at the time, when I was a kid, 11 years old, I loved turtles. That's my favorite photo of myself with a turtle right there. It's the only one I have. And, turtle on the right. We used to catch snapping turtles in the Chesapeake Bay and paint numbers on their shells and then throw them back and then try to estimate how many turtles there were in the Chesapeake Bay based on our mark recapture research. And so needless to say, we never published that study. Some serious flaws in our methodology, but it did create kind of a desire a love of turtles and a love of math. And so I was sort of a total math and turtle geek, which means that you start seeing turtles everywhere you go. And whoever laughed the loudest, you probably look most like a turtle. That's usually what I found. I remember telling my dad that I wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman, that I was going to be a turtle guy. And I remember that feeling. He was completely worried, just confused. And it wasn't until an article landed on his desk in National Geographic about our research. And he's one of those people with the yellow wall, all the back issues all the way back to his childhood. And when he saw, we have the same name, and he saw his name in that yellow magazine and got to slide it in at the end of the latest shelf, it all kind of was okay, right? The fear, the dread, his concern went away in that moment. So just a reminder that you can reach people in different ways. My dad, it was just this yellow magazine. That was the deciding factor that got him to sort of accept that his son was a turtle guide. So I started studying sea turtles in northwestern Mexico and Baja, one of my favorite places in the world still. My study site is 3,000 miles of coastline called the Baja Peninsula and the mainland coast of the Sea of Cortez, Gulf of California. And the first things we did is we stuck a transmitter on the back of a turtle and threw her back into the ocean. She'd been in captivity for 10 years, being looked after by my colleagues, Antonio and Betty Resendez. And she swam off with the transmitter on her back. And there's the rest of the story. After 10 years in captivity, she decided that she would swim home. First animal ever tracked swimming across an entire ocean. It took her 368 days. This is 20 years ago. This is the 20th anniversary year. Nobody had ever tracked a turtle, let alone put the track on the internet. So we sort of pioneered the idea of real-time data sharing, which my advisor said was career suicide. But we did it anyway, and it turned out it wasn't. And a lot of people share their data online in real time now, sort of a cool thing to do. Back then it was slightly scandalous. She swam home to the natal beaches where loggerhead turtles come from. 7,000 miles away, 368 days. And then we had millions of kids by the end of the track, or adults too, tracking her and shared the data. Got to collaborate in all kinds of wonderful ways with teachers, math teachers, science teachers, English teachers, and other scientists around the world who are better at analyzing data than we were, had different thoughts. So I think there's a lot, I'm not going to talk about turtles much there, but there's a lot to say about turtle biology, but the metaphor is powerful. This metaphor, what walls have you swum through? Like that turtle swam through a wall and just kept swimming and went home. So what are the walls that you've swum through in your life? The barriers, people said you couldn't do something and you had to, or you told yourself you couldn't do it, but you did it anyway and you made it happen. And probably more importantly, what are the walls you need to swim through? One of the projects I worked on in the sea turtle realm was bringing the black sea turtle back literally from the brink of extinction. Experts thought it was too late, but we worked with the turtle hunters, created an emotional connection, a friendship, and I would even go so far as to call it love of each other and these places and these animals. This is Chewy Lucero, who grew up hunting and eating turtles and now is one of the greatest turtle protectors on the planet. And Juan de la Cruz Villejos, probably responsible for harpooning 3,000 turtles in his career. And at that time, I took that photo, I would say he was made of turtle, like literally physically made of turtle protein. And he ended up being a great ally for sea turtles. This year we'll celebrate the 20th year of Grupo Tortuguero, which is a grassroots sea turtle network that encompasses 50 communities throughout Mexico. And the news is good. Populations are on the rise. It's not time to take our foot off the gas by any means, but it's trending in the right direction. And it isn't because we just spent millions of dollars. We've had really small budgets, scraped together small grants for over 20 years, going back to 1996. And it's been based in what I call full immersion conservation, which is not really what we're taught to do. It's getting really deeply involved with people doing good science, but building capacity. And we've changed the conversation. And that's sort of, I guess, what I would say my career is all about, is changing conversations for good. We've changed the conversation about sea turtles for good. So now people are talking about sea turtles in a completely different way. There's an economic incentive still, but it isn't a consumptive use. It's a more sustainable use, which is taking people out on experiences. So enough people are now recognizing that if you go out whale watching, you might also go out turtle watching and bird watching, maybe nudibranch watching for those who are. And as a result, throughout Latin America, just look at the data, many populations are trending upwards. And I don't want to overlook the ones that aren't. There are several important populations that are flat or still declining. But it's worth looking at where we've had success and why. And it isn't just because we piled up studies in science and then come back to the US and patted ourselves on the back and patted our CVs. It's because of long-term commitment, building relationships, and getting into the emotional side of things. Realizing that people are made of turtle in some cases, that there is no separation between us and nature. We act like it, our academic institutions are siloed, but it's a total illusion. Right? There is no separation. It's a total illusion. This is the most words I'm going to put on the screen, so that probably is just a little shocking after all these photos, but Gus Spath used to head up the Yale School of Forestry. He has a very interesting look at ecology and also economics. He says he used to think that if we just got a lot of research and did it for 30 years, we would solve these problems. Turns out it doesn't work that way. You need to build movement. You need to do cultural and spiritual transformation. And I'm really pretty confident in using the word spiritual in public as a scientist, because that's the right word. That's the sense that we get when we are in awe and feel wonder and are just under the night sky or face to face with a whale or swimming with a turtle, or you fill in the blank for yourself. It is a spiritual experience, and that's what makes us unstoppable. At least that's what makes me and many of my colleagues unstoppable. It isn't their big fat salaries, it isn't their 401k or the company car they get to drive. That's not what makes them unstoppable, it's this stuff. And we need to talk about that, we need to build more of it. And I know several of you in this room have been engaged in that, looking at you, Tierney, engaged in doing that for your entire career, being a cutting-edge scientist, but sharing, and recruiting and inspiring the next generation of unstoppable people who are just gonna, whether it's giant, mola or sea turtles or tide pools, just gonna be unstoppable in defense of them. So this is the idea of Blue Mind. We need to step back and widen our gaze, because the way we teach the next generation of leaders is so incomplete, and I would say flawed, and probably dangerously so, because we leave out the entire conversation about the human mind, the brain. We don't talk about neuroscience in conservation class. We should. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm a turtle guy, but I have friends who are, and that's another thing that Tierney and I have in common. She's doing some great research with Nick Save at Stanford, who is a neuroscientist, that is totally fascinating and applicable to conservation. So reaching across the aisle, so to speak, or walking across campus, knocking on the door of the neuropsychologist, the neurophysiologist, and saying, hey, I've got a problem, I think you may be able to help me work it out. They're studying our brains, but they're also studying at the level of the neuron. They're studying the evolution of our nervous system. They're studying the physiology, but more importantly, they're studying the application to the real world. So applied neuroscience, or social neuroscience, or neuroeconomics, or many names it goes by. Right, so we used to understand the human brain as, like, from this black box perspective. You could stimulate it, you could measure what happened, but you couldn't see what was going on inside. Until we were able to look inside, which in the early days meant that you got a brain when people were done using it, if you know what I mean by that. So you could look at the injuries, the anomalies, and compare them to the behavior when that person was alive. And neuroscience went along like that for hundreds of years. Pretty crude, but we created some knowledge, some brain maps. We were able to say, well, if there's an injury here, that seems to be correlated with the behavior like this. And there's some famous cases, you can look them up. Phineas Gage is a famous guy who had a spike basically shot through his head, did some damage, changed his personality. And that was neuroscience. Then we got more technology and able to look at the brain while people were still using it, using EEGs and fMRIs, and that's the technology that Nick and Tierney are using to study people's response to photographs of nature. And I'm so excited to like learn as it gets published and as it comes out, because it's, you know, I geek out on this stuff, and I'm an avid reader. We were able to just ask questions about the brain at rest and the brain in motion, the active brain, and what happens when you're processing, say, a math problem versus floating on your back in a pool, right? The different modes that we move in and out of. We're able to talk about things like love that used to be off limits to scientists, but now there's a science of love. And it involves serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin and various brain regions. And the emotion we call love is quite complex. You'll notice Subaru sells cars using the emotion they call love, right? We need to sell conservation and protection and restoration, right, with love, not just fear, and I'll get to that. Little side note there, oops, on the love, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'll skip that. I was going to tell you a story about, I'll tell you anyway, about talking to my wife about the neuroscience of love on Valentine's Day, and it took her out of the mood completely. I guess that's like everybody probably knows that, but just put that in your little advice folder. Don't talk about neuroscience on Valentine's Day evening, unless of course your honey is really into it. So oxytocin is one of those great chemicals, neurochemicals, that actually is involved in emotion, and it's sort of almost a cliche, but it is involved in building trust. Far more complex, and that, you know, I'll sound like I'm repeating myself a lot, but the story with neuroscience is always more complex than anything you can say on the slide. There's way more complexity. We're really just in the earliest stages of understanding our own brains, but we are beginning to understand things that we didn't understand 10 years ago, even a year ago. If you go to the science section of the bookstore or the library, you'll find all these cool books about neuroscience popularized. Oliver Sacks writing about music in the brain, anything from creativity to happiness to economics, neuroeconomics, decision making, even how magicians fool you into thinking they can actually do magic. Turns out they are amateur neuroscientists. They know your brain better than you, so they can trick you, and you don't even realize how they did it. And we call it illusionism or magic. Cover of Scientific American, meditation, right? 10 years ago, no way, you would never see that. Now, boom, there it is. Right? The science of meditation. So not hippy-dippy, not California, whatever you hear when you're not at home, when you're traveling. I hear it all. I know some of you may get some of that feedback when you're on the East Coast or whatever it is. It's science, right? It's whether it's neuroscience, neuropsychology, the science of mindfulness. It's pretty interesting. Nobel Prizes being won in applied neuroscience. So this team won a Nobel Prize 2 years ago for figuring out how our brain makes mental maps. Right? The GPS neuron, they refer to it sort of colloquially. How do you find your car? You made a map. It's a physical map, right? In your head, it tells you where your car is. Right? If you've never parked it there, you made a map. Right? How the heck do we do that? Well, that's what they're studying. Super interesting, right? To know that. So, in summary, this is the golden age of neuroscience. We are in it. 20 years ago, there was a lot more research really focused on the human heart. Right? What you got was little hearts on your menu. You know, heart healthy, heart friendly. A lot of applications of the science of the human heart. Right? That's beginning to happen with the brain. You're going to start seeing little brains, brain friendly. Supplements, nutrition, food, connected to a healthy neurosystem. And brain unfriendly activities, chemicals, food, a whole range of things that are bad for our brains. We're seeing that already. Right? So it turns out nature is a pretty interesting part of this conversation. It's the first generation to have a user's manual and owner's guide for our own brain. Think about that. Pretty handy, right? In school, I learned basically nothing about my brain. In health class, all the way through 24th grade, we just never talked about the human brain. But there it is, right in the middle of your skull. There are all these realms that intersect with neuroscience, and only recently has nature, water, forests, the kind of work that Tierney and Nick are pioneering, really. Nick calls himself an environmental neuroeconomist. And he, for a while there, he was like the only one. Basically pioneered the field that, with some colleagues at Stanford, that he is one of the leaders of. You can find neuroscience being applied to music and to all range of healthcare issues, even art. There were more studies about your brain on red wine than your brain on nature not long ago. Now that's starting to balance out a little bit, fortunately. But think about that, right? Well, I guess the wine industry and the chocolate industry were funding those, and the nature industry, the NGOs, were not. And that's a little bone to pick. Where were we? Where are we? Why aren't we funding research on our brain on nature? The coffee, the chocolate, and the wine industry is for their world, but we're not. We need to. If you could put nature in a pill, it might look like that. It would have very few side effects. It would boost a lot of good things. You can't put it in a pill, but that's a designer from, at University of Exeter Medical School made that graphic, and I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. So here's the antithesis of Blue Mind. This book came out, and it basically scared an entire generation out of the water, out of the ocean, out of the lakes, out of the rivers, and occasionally out of a shower. I have to say, as a kid, it freaked me out completely. Went in really deep, created an emotional disconnect that is still alive and well in our society. A book did that, right? Fear motivated us in a kind of irrational way, but that sort of goes to show what a story can do, what our imaginations are capable of in any direction. There's a new wave of books that is trying to get everybody back in the woods and back in the water. I wrote the one about water, but Flo Williams wrote a great book called The Nature Fix, and then Richard Loeb has a series of books about kids and nature. Turns out that Richard is a big water guy, and barely mentioned water in that pioneering book there. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write Blue Mind, because I recognized that, as usual, the blue parts get sort of their secondary attention, secondary funding at any kind of environmental conference. That's starting to change, but for much of our careers, water was overlooked. The ocean was almost completely overlooked and given like a last chapter in the environmental textbook. Another Nobel Prize in economics by Richard Thaler from the University of Chicago this year, actually just last month. Right? There's a book that he wrote, but he studies irrational human behavior in economics, which is basically every single thing we do. Economics is based on the idea that we are rational and we have complete information. Two completely false statements. The entire field is based on those ideas. That's changing too, thanks to people like Dr. Thaler and Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist. But I like that quote. In order to do good economics, you have to keep in mind that people are human. Right? It's supposed to be kind of a little tongue-in-cheek there, right? So neuroconservation is the application of these ideas to conservation, neuroscience, economics, conservation. And I would say, in order to do good conservation, you have to keep in mind that people are human. The human dimension is often left out at the conservation conferences in favor of the biological, ecological, and economic dimensions that, oh, by the way, are also involve humans. But we have even this phrase, the human dimension, that we had to create to remind scientists to not forget about the human component. This is just an old little study we did with SANS Research. They're famous for doing studies of Super Bowl ads. So if you're going to spend millions of dollars on a Super Bowl ad, you'll send it to SANS, they'll analyze it before you put it on air, and then they'll give you some feedback on eye tracking and emotional response. Right? Pretty simple stuff, but Dr. Sands pioneered the technology and the algorithms that are used in labs all over the world and then he started this sort of consulting firm. So we sent him some of Bob Talbot's footage just to kind of play with. And the eye tracking stuff is pretty regular in the marketing world, but adding in the EEG was pretty cool. And that's just a little sample. There's no real meaning there. It's just sort of a graphic show of what kinds of things people are doing to make those Super Bowl ads so awesome. I wish the ocean had a neuroscience lab on its side as big as a Super Bowl ad does, but it doesn't. So kind of interesting. So here's the main point is we talk about the ecological, the economic, and the educational value of healthy nature, but we usually leave out the emotional value. And not only should we include it as the fourth E, we should put it at the top of the list. Because it's the thing that grabs people. It's where people live day to day, many times. There's some emotional connection. It may be fear. It may be love. It may be a whole complicated set of emotions, most likely. But it's real. We are emotional beings. And when we just leave that out, we're going to just get it wrong. Emotion is a response of our entire organism to the world around us, which involves other people, but involves other organisms and nature itself, the environment. It's science, right? Emotion is science. That's another just simple idea that is kind of been overlooked for a while. There's a great report that just came out called Heartwired that I highly recommend you check it out. It's a group of social change experts who've been trying to figure out how to do their job better, and not just in the realm of conservation, but in a whole wide range of sort of progressive issues that they're engaged with. And this report called Heartwired is nicely done. It was funded by the Packard Foundation. And they're actually looking at ocean communication. And Robert Perez will be speaking at our workshop on Blue Mind in January. They're trying to apply their work to ocean advocacy and better frame the way we tell these stories. We like to talk about water as medicine because it is. So we have a program called Blue Mind RX that is bringing together all the research that connects water to emotional health in particular, mental health. And there's a growing body of that research, and putting that into the hands of people who are who are healthcare professionals. We know that 60% of diseases, disorders, and illnesses are connected to or directly caused by stress. So this is a public health conversation, a very significant one when we talk about stress. Our lives are increasingly distracted and connected and full of information. And I won't go into the details of that because you are living it. There are always screens almost everywhere we go. Even if you go out for dinner, sometimes there's 15 screens all around the restaurant. And that's considered relaxing, right? Your brain is trying to process 15 different moving human faces or games, plus the background music, the menu, and then the waiter who likes to tell you their life story. And so that's our new version of relaxing. Kids are increasingly wired, connected to social media. I have 2 daughters. I pay close attention to the research and them, obviously. Higher rates of depression and anxiety related to this hyper-connectivity and this constant judging of each other. That is quite real. It's a huge experiment that we're in the midst of, not really sure where it's going, what the outcomes are, but here we are, playing it out. This new report by the APA, the American Psychological Association, that studies stress in America, it's an annual report, they've done it for the past 10 years. Stress this past year went up for the first time in a decade, right? For a number of reasons. One of them starts with a T, and you can guess. But stress going up rather than staying flat or going down is a new phenomenon that has significant, massive public health ramifications. Everywhere I go, I've gone to 28 states the past 2 years. This is what the front page of the local newspapers look like. Drug busts, addicts, different parts of this story, pollution related to all of the above. This is a big news story, the cost of the opioid crisis. is not just people dying, it's everybody in that pyramid all the way up to morbidity. And that's a huge, huge issue right now. We have post-traumatic stress, our first responders, our veterans, not to mention people who have experienced any kind of abuse or trauma, are carrying this post-traumatic stress. And again, without getting, you could spend an entire day talking about the science of post-traumatic stress. We now recognize it as real. It's an invisible illness or an invisible injury. That's the way some of the Marine generals describe it at a meeting I went to. That was a really kind of a good breakthrough for them to accept that post-traumatic stress is real. Often leads to people taking their own lives, suicide. Jim Harrison, great writer, said that of the 12 or 13 suicides that he's known among his writer friends, none of them had any interest in the natural world. Just a purely anecdotal statement by a guy who is known for his ability to observe the world around him. That I thought was kind of a very interesting insight. This is the lowest I'm going to go right here. So just give you that warning and maybe that relief. We're going to bring it back up. But hopefully you're feeling a little stressed by this conversation. And this is what I call red mind. And this is kind of where we're living a lot of our days. And whether you are listening to the news or reading it, it's kind of this constant barrage of red mind. You could theoretically go and have the red mind removed, and then you walk out and say, okay, I'm all good now. The monkey mind, as neuroscientists and Zen practitioners call it, but that's not currently available, have the red mind removed. Then, so we as environmental communicators, we show up and we say, okay, let's use fear. On top of all this background red mind, let's scare people into action. Let's double down on fear. And then maybe some anger. If we get mad, throw a little fear and anger at people who are already stressed out. And then guilt and shame, that'll work. That will really be the recipe that gets people compelled to care. And then a whole lot of facts. We love factoids, we love percentages and stats. We just love to barrage people with stats. Mind-numbing stuff. Even the most statistically inclined of us can get pretty numbed out by all those reams of facts. So here we go. This is my summary of the way we do it. This is the preamble of most environmental documentaries, ocean films, reports, magazines, books. Basically, gives you a bunch of stats about the ocean, and then tells you all the stuff that the ocean gives us, that is mostly resource-based, and then the crisis, then the zinger, where it's in crisis, and man, it's going to collapse, it's really bad, and it's your fault, and oh, by the way, do you want to join our club? Right, that's usually people will avoid you the next time they see you coming, and so our club remains small, and generally ineffective, and we get what we got. And I think we can do a better job with our communications by basically not stressing people out even more, by taking a different approach. And that is kind of marketing 101, really. So that means adding in some gratitude. Fear, anger, shame, facts, all really important, all motivating. But if that's all you got, you're gonna get burnt out. I've experienced it myself with a lot of dead animals over and over and over and over. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I just couldn't go to work counting dead animals. And if you don't have resilience and you don't have an outlet, that will just take you out of the game, and that's not a good direction. Gratitude and love, right? Connecting with what we love and actually using the L word in public. And if you need the neuroscience to back it up, give me a call. I'm happy to give you all that load of the neuroscience of love. Building trust, that oxytocin thing. Right? I like to start talks with a blue marble and the question about your water. It connects people. Sometimes we'll talk to each other and share stories. It bumps up the oxytocin in the room. Right? Coca-Cola knows that, Subaru knows that, McDonald's knows that. They want you to trust their brand, right? Not fear their brand. And then they use that trust to sell you stuff that you don't need and that might even hurt you. Not in the case of Subaru cars, they're cool. I wish they had an electric, but I guess that might be coming. So the science, there is a lot of science, and I'll be happy to send you reams of PDFs, so you can find them on my website, that look at the psychological benefits of green space. Turns out blue space is good too, sometimes better, but the combination of blue and green seems to be the most effective. And again, I defer to Tierney and work with Nick on cracking the code on some of that with their current research. The sound of nature, add that in. It isn't just what you see, it's what you hear. And it's also what you feel. It's the whole shebang, all of the senses. But taking a break and listening to nature, it resets you. It lowers your heart rate, lowers your breathing rate, and reduces your stress. Now, we've known that forever. We've known that really, really, really going way, way, way back, all time. We've known that water is life. All traditional cultures kind of have that basic idea as part of the way they roll. We painted the ocean, and people lined up and paid money to see it. It's a painting by my brother-in-law before he passed away, ALS. He used to paint the coast. That was one of his last paintings when he had his paintbrush literally strapped to his head to paint. And that's my sister's painting, side by side with him, the same stretch of the Maine coast in Stonington, Jill and John. That's Rand Ordner painting these giant triptychs that are just basically water. They almost look like high-def photographs if you step back and look at them. Cover the New Yorker, constantly depicting water in the summertime because it knows it makes people happy, except that one time. I get different reactions in different parts of the country to that. I'm like, or hill. Corona uses Blue Mind to sell mediocre beer in a clear bottle. They need to put a lime in it to make it taste good. But it's worked, right? Some of their ads are pretty cool ads. It doesn't improve the beer, but it's a cool ad. Nestea, the Nestea Plunge. This country western song by Trace Atkins. I don't know, I've cried actually driving down the highway listening to this song, I have to admit it. Just about being out there on the water with your kid, not really catching anything, right? The last line of Shawshank Redemption, right? Morgan Freeman. Literally, that is the last line of the movie. He's in prison. Watch the movie, it'll make a lot more sense why I included it. And then this great film, Academy Award winning Moonlight. Water probably could have won an Academy Award and everybody would have said right on, because water was a character throughout the film. So best supporting actress perhaps would have been the category. So we know this is an ancient idea that water is medicine. It's our first medicine for hydration and hygiene, but also for mental health, right? It's real, the effects are real. And we, as ecologists, we talk about trophic cascades, ecosystem services, really important concepts. But we should also talk about neurologic cascades and emotional services, right? Let's not leave that out anymore. Actually, I'm begging you, I require you to stop leaving it out of the way you communicate the value of nature, of water, of forest. So this is, I kind of went slower than I was planning. This is my break and sort of a pulse check. I can plow through what I refer to as the 7 ages of water, which kind of breaks down how Blue Mind impacts our lives. I can go super fast through it, or we can stop and just do questions. So we can kind of take it in one power through. Or if you just want to leave right now, if you're like, wow, I got it, and that was whatever it was, and you feel like leaving, you can feel free to do that. All right, so like maybe a 20-minute sprint through the 7 ages of water?
Please.
Yeah? Okay. Birth, of course, right? That's where it starts. Actually, it starts at conception, right? Underwater. Where does conception occur? Generally speaking, underwater. It's an aquatic phenomenon. Then, boom, birth. Sometimes births are water births. It's a very good way to do that thing. And giving birth underwater. And I have a friend who's the world expert on water birth, and asked her, are there wild water births? Like obviously in the animal kingdom, but do humans go into lakes and rivers and oceans to give birth? And she said, heck yeah, all over the world. It's part of many cultures, and she has these great stories. And she's coming to teach in this workshop in January. Barbara Harper. We can begin the parenting process in water. Get your kid in the water early is basically the message there, right? There is no too young. Of course, if there are medical concerns and so on and so forth, but even so, many of the cases I've seen, babies who were not thriving on land get in the water and their mobility increases. So I don't ever want to over-exaggerate the medical side of this. It's always with caution. There are no silver bullets, but water birth and water parenting are two pretty good ideas. All right. Next age of the 7 I call play, which is when we get a little bit bigger. I'd say maybe the transition is walking, but that's kind of fuzzy. But at some point, we begin to play. We begin to interact with the world around us. The neuroscience of play, super fascinating, a whole wide open realm that is telling us that play is good for our brains, actually necessary for proper neurological, emotional, cognitive development. Right? We need to play. And we should play throughout our lives. Don't ever stop playing. Water turns out to be a pretty good place to play. One reason is you move in 3 dimensions. It does a lot of different things. It can be in solid, liquid, and gas. It's all over the world. It's generally free to play with. And if you fall in water, if you're playing, sometimes it's just okay and you just pop back up and it's all right. Playing in water, it's a place to feel hopeful. It's a place to get away from the red mind and just feel a moment of hope, whether it's the water falling from the sky or building trust with each other and the water itself as kids through play. Right? Learning to swim, right? You have to remember being at the bottom of the pool, figuring out how you do that. Like, how do you hold your breath? How long can you hold your breath? What can you do a backflip underwater? All those things that that some of us have done. And then seeing kids who didn't learn to swim learn to love the water. This group, Northwest Passage, getting kids in Wisconsin into the rivers. And these are kids that are in facilities where it's basically their last chance before they're kind of locked up for life. And they find a new lease on life through rivers. Mask and snorkel, you get a wetsuit and a camera, and it's like, you can look up Northwest Passage on YouTube and listen to the kids tell their stories in their own words. My friend Chad, who takes kids in Portland out fly fishing, also takes veteran groups, had a similar experience. And again, it's not about even catching a fish, it's about getting out of the city, getting out of the overstimulated environment. Even our First Lady says that natural benefits are good for kids. And this wasn't just a one-off quote, she said it twice. So that means something, I think. But I'm hoping, I don't know what the conversations are, like, around in bed at home, if there even are any. And I'm not really hopeful that that's the way this would get transmitted, but I still want to include that quote in there just because, I don't know, I'm hanging on to something. Confidence. This experience of being in the water helps us build confidence. That's my daughter Julia. I like to say, doesn't need any more confidence. So if there was a way to unbuild a little bit of confidence, that would be super cool. I don't know what that would be, but that's she's super confident. One of our homegrown organizations, the Wahini Project, getting kids to the ocean and go out and ever spend time in the water. It's putatively a surf program, but it's so much more. To call it a surf program is just selling it short. It's an empowerment life program for these kids, mostly young women. The sense of freedom that you get when you're in the water, whether you're a leatherback turtle or a human being. And this guy, Naoki Higashida, an autistic kid from Japan, wrote this book, The Reason I Jump. And this is my favorite passage from the book where he talks about water and how he feels when he's in the water. It's quiet and he feels free. He feels like us. He just gets away from the red mind, which is much more severe for his brain, and he just gets calm. And it's like he's going back home. And that's what we're all on the continuum. We're all on the spectrum in one way or another. We're all sensitive to overstimulation, and we all need a break from it. Singing in the rain before life, right? It's not just for kids. You should play all the time. Next time it rains, here's your homework. Go outside and sing. but take somebody with you. And just do it. Right? Just trust me on this. You don't even need an umbrella. Just the rain comes down hard, grab somebody, say, hey man, Jason, we're going to go sing. Let's do it. Right down Pacific and just sing your lungs out. Okay, the next stage, the lover. This is where we fall in love with ideas, each other, places, and ourselves. Right? This next age where you start to become a young adult. And that happens through dreams. You have daydreams and nighttime dreams, and big ideas that always start out in the realm of dreams. And what we know from psychologists is that dreaming, mind wandering, is super important. It's really healthy. If you see a kid dreaming these days, let them dream. If they're looking out the window, spacing out, and not looking at their phone, that's awesome. Just let that go. Because something good could happen there. We need to do more of that, and we're getting less and less of that mind-wandering, daydreaming stuff. Water is a place where we can find privacy, and I won't go into the details, but privacy is a disappearing commodity, right? From every direction, whether it's cameras monitoring on the street or other kinds of devices or the devices we carry with us. Privacy is near and dear and important for a healthy brain. To feel okay, you need a place to go where you know that it's just you or the person you're with. Water affords that. Walking by water, getting in the water, sitting by a fountain gives us that sense of privacy. Water also gives us awe, and awe and wonder provoke empathy and compassion. There's some great research by Dr. Paul Piff on the neuropsychology of awe and wonder, and the crew up at Berkeley. Sarah Cole put it on the cover of their magazine. The science of awe. Not just awe, but the science of awe. Right? It's a nascent kind of conversation, but super interesting. And think about a life without awe. What would that be like? An awe-free life. It would be dry and sparse and incomplete. And imagine a lifestyle, you can just imagine what that would look like, where you just never experienced awe. You mostly experienced maybe apps and walls. I ask kids, where do you get your awe? And I've never had a kid say, from my phone. Right? There's utility, and there's some beauty sometimes, and it's interesting and it's entertaining. You get entertainment, you get a laugh, but you don't get awe. That's a whole other level, and it shifts us in a different way. It helps us build empathy. When we feel small and surprised and completely humbled, it sets us up for empathy. And you can imagine different leaders of our time who probably don't experience much awe and empathy and humility. It switches us from a me perspective to a we perspective. That's a good thing when you live on a planet with anybody else. It's a necessary thing. Right. The lover is also about romance. We connect to each other by the water. But that, remember that movie there? There, Titanic. So they're up on the bow, they fall in love, they sail across the ocean, get married, have kids. Awesome story. They fell in love up on the bow there. And then there's that movie, From Here to Eternity. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it. Going back a little bit. I include that because so there's that scene, they're smooching on the beach. Remove the ocean, and it's two people basically in their underwear rolling around in the dirt. And makes no sense whatsoever. Would not be in the movie. You bring the ocean back and it totally makes sense. It's romantic, actually it's sexy and romantic and makes the movie pop, literally. All right, the next age, after the lover, we fight for what we love. We fight for those we love, with the places and the ideas. We fight for ourselves. We are lovers and fighters. That was the title of a commencement address I gave back in 2010 at my alma mater in Indiana. People who fight for what they love. Great example, Sylvia Earle, Amanda Jo Green, fighting for the Hudson River. Alice Brown Otter, fighting for her community's water. Steph Curry, fighting for, that seemed like a little abrupt turn there, but fighting for, I don't know where, he's a warrior and he fights to win, but he's good at it, right? He is, that fighter category is also our athletes, our warriors, our advocates. The Cubs, they fought how many years? Like 100 years, and they finally pulled it off. And the reason I include the Warriors, the Cubs, and the Patriots is they all do float therapy. After a bad day, a bad game, a bad week, their best players all do float therapy. Right? Not saying that that's why they won the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the NBA championship, but they did last year. But they all do float therapy in water. Maybe it's a coincidence, right? Maybe it's just a fluke. Water gives us humility. It sets us back. It humbles us. Nature does that. Mountains and rocks and waterfalls and oceans and rivers. They humble us. When we fight, sometimes we get broken. This is Martin Pollock. Left his legs and one arm on the battlefield in Afghanistan, came back to the UK, Cornwall, planned on just drinking his life away in a pub. He said, I'm going to be a blob on a stool in the bar. Came to Santa Cruz, learned to surf, met up with the crew from Operation Surf, and now Martin is an ocean ambassador. I would call him an ocean warrior. And he told me, I am trained to win, and now the ocean is my cause. You know why? The ocean gave me my life back. And he's traveling the world as a surf ambassador, surfs with great surfers like Larry Hamilton and Kelly Slater, and they admire him, and vice versa. And so he's just an inspiring guy. The ocean gave him that life. Groups like Heroes On, there are many organizations that are working on these connections. And the key here is that it works a lot better when it's not just therapy. That's important. But there's a give back. Becoming an ocean warrior or a river warrior is really important to it not being another round of feeling bad. Okay, this is the next age is I call the justice. And that's the big middle age that a lot of us are probably in right now, say all of us, where we're expected to be productive and responsible to solve problems on demand. That is your life. You wake up and you solve problems all day long in one shape or form. At home, at work, at school, in the world, that's your job. You're the justice. You are balancing your life. You're helping others balance their lives. You're the responsible adult in the room. That is heavy. That is really heavy. Do not underestimate the load that you're carrying, the load that's on all of our shoulders, with all of that combined. In your friends, your family, your work, your school, all of it. You need to find a way to relax. Right? That's where water comes in. Now, people move to the coast. There's a lot of pressure. This is a house for sale down in Del Mar Beach. This is summer 2003. We did a trek from Oregon to Mexico down the coast, a summer coastal trek. And I stopped and took that photo. So this is my question. Summer 2003, 800 square foot bungalow on the beach in Del Mar. What do you think the asking price was? 6.3 million. Yeah. Wow. That was summer 2003. Now, this is a Zillow snap from September 2014. They did a study, and they found that waterfront more than doubled on average around the country. Lakes, rivers, and oceans. This same beach, it's 1,000% premium between the second row and the front row. Think about that. 1,000% premium, 10 times more. $1 million on average in the second row, 10 million on average in the front row. What do they think they're getting? Nothing? It's the biggest single financial transaction of their lives is a premium on top of the base price. And if you ask people, what are you getting? They're not even sure, but they know they want it. It's this blue mind pull, right? So my advice in this case, we've got sea level rise, we've got climate change. This is going to be a dynamic zone, needless to say. Back the blank up and make that public so that those benefits accrue throughout the community. And the communities that have done that well, parts of Pacific Grove, and travel up and down the coast and look at places that have backed up and given a big swath, it makes the communities super awesome and super livable when you have a big swath of public space adjacent to the water, whether it's a lake, a river, or an ocean. right? And those benefits accrue further further back in the community. Cities like Pittsburgh are transforming their waterfronts. Super cool. Pittsburgh is winning awards for its waterfront transformation. It's not just transforming the waterfront, it's doing what I just described throughout the community. Pittsburgh had turned their backs on their river for many decades, and now that's starting to change. We build fountains. We don't need to build fountains. They're costly to maintain and build. But they're the places where people go for breaks in between their busy days. They go and sit. That wall where those people are sitting was not designed for people to sit on it. But this is the Seagram's building in New York. It's dangerous actually to shimmy out on that wall. But people desire to be there. Super interesting from an urban blue perspective. Urban fountains make our cities better. Just a fun little fountain there in Portland. Portland is a great city for public water. Public aquariums that allow this experience, this blue mind experience for visitors. We know that this aquarium experience has psychological benefits, right? It's measurable. In this study that I did with colleagues at the University of Exeter Medical School, preliminary study looking at psychological well-being in response to an aquarium exhibit. We know that doses of aquarium. So if you go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, this is a group of people who have memorized every darn sign in the whole place. But they still come back. They're not coming back to learn. They've memorized every fact. They're coming back for something else. And we all go there for that something else. And that's this blue mind feeling. So we should talk about that. My dream is that every aquarium has an exhibit on your way in, teaching you about your brain on ocean, your brain on water. As you come through the portal, it primes the pump and sets you up to really experience the aquarium. So feelings of solitude, extremely important thing to have in your life, moments of solitude or alone time even with other people. Learning solitude, and this generation is experiencing a lot less solitude because anytime you're feeling a little bit alone, you pull out your phone and you're connected to a billion other people. And you can have a conversation with one of them who's going to be awake, right? So the sense of solitude that is actually a pretty important thing to experience is being taken away. Creativity for the justice is important, your creativity on demand. The great Oliver Sacks said that he got his best ideas in the water. I wanted him to write Blue Mind, I actually pitched it to him, and he said, you do it. And I had a lot of respect for he died last year. I got the book to him before he passed away, which was one of the goals. But he got his best ideas while in the water. Pharrell Williams also says the same thing. His creativity comes from the water. He gets his clearest ideas, his best songs in response to water. That's Pharrell Williams. I usually mention Pharrell Williams rather than Oliver Sacks when I talk to kids, just because they don't really know who Oliver Sacks is and they know this guy's music. Comparing Blue Mind and Red Mind in the business world, I won't get into this in detail, but in these productive years of our lives, collaborative approaches versus competitive approaches are sometimes much more useful. The whole range of sort of business strategies. Right, second to last age, I'm going to crank through this. Ebb and flow is when we start to slow down, right? Water becomes therapeutic. It's good to get in the water and exercise and move in the water. This is Jarmila. She was in an institution for 10 years, dealing with Alzheimer's, passed away last year. And my friend Greg visited her and said, Jarmila, what do you want to do before you're in bed? She said, I want to see the ocean again. And so Greg and his wife took Jarmila to Santa Monica Pier. And she stood up, shuffled forward, grabbed the railing. And later on, Greg said, Jarmila, I didn't know you could even stand or walk. And she said, I haven't had anything worth walking to in a long time. So it's that question. Just ask the question. Do you want to see your water? Do you want to get in it? And just listen. So I work with a lot of hospice organizations, and they need that reminder. Just to ask their patients, and also the families of the patients, and they themselves. Remember your water, whether it's a lake outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, or the coast here in Monterey. It was once a beloved component of that person's life. So ask that question, what's your water? Do you want to go there? We can take water into the hospital in different ways, including